So I want to talk to you today a bit about Tantra itself. Where does it come from? What's the history of Tantra and what you need to know before we start to get into the material of this course. So let's begin with the history of the word Tantra. Tantra comes from ancient yogic literature. Some say it dates back between 400 to 500 CE, so that's very, very, very ancient, over thousands of years old. And the Sanskrit term Tantra means to weave or to loom together. And you'll understand why shortly. So the most important thing to understand is that the most ancient scripture of Tantra is called the Vijnana Bhairavi Tantra. And this ancient scripture of Tantra was a dialogue between Shiva, the great yogi, the presence, the god, and Parvati, which is his consort, his wife. And Parvati asked Shiva these questions about who is he? Who are you? Who is this mystery? Do you have a form? How do I attain you? And Lord Shiva begins to reveal to Parvati the secrets of the universe. And he explains to Parvati how we can use techniques and tools to experience Tantra, to understand how to reach that state of divine consciousness, to transcend the limitations of human suffering. And so the teachings of Tantra were not just about sexuality, okay? They were about science, medicine, arts, astrology. It's such a vast subject. And when we think about yoga, which is so popular today, and Hatha yoga, the tradition of Hatha yoga, which looks at working with our dualities of the Ida, Pingla, the Yin and the Yang, the Shiva, the Shakti, right? When we look at these two, working with these true polarities within our body to create a sense of unification in the central channel, which is the space of the Kundalini, the Shumla Nadi. This is also an expression of Tantra, which is merging the opposites to recognize the oneness or the integration. So Tantra was a whole system traditionally, and it was a system to use the body, to use our inclinations of desires and feelings, to use the human self, not suppressing it, to working with it and going into it to then discover the ultimate reality of our connection to source and creator. So whereas a lot of the traditional spiritual teachings were about the denial or the suppression of our sexual instinct, the suppression of our yearnings, the suppression or the denial through these really intense sadhanas or spiritual practices, Tantra was much more accessible to the common person who had all these human expressions but still wanted to reach the divine. And this is one of the reasons why I talk and share with you about the teachings of Tantra in this course, so that we recognize that it's not the suppression or the denial or the dismissal of our human functioning, whether it's the psychology, our emotions, our feelings, our yearnings, our sexual instincts. It's not the denial of them, it's we're working with them to transcend and then reach the truth, the reality of our connection to the beloved. So I want to tell you a bit about the evolution of Tantra, because we watch these films in the media, and we Google Tantra, and we come across all these ideas of Tantra like it's some sexual sport, so to speak, right? And so we have this understanding of Tantra which is not the full picture. So We also may see Tantra portrayed in media as a very terrifying thing of worshiping, darkness and being in the graveyard, right? So this is what I want to tell you about the tradition of Tantra. So as Tantra started to emerge, we have Buddhist tantric texts and we have the Hindu texts of Tantra. The one class or form of Tantra was around the Bhakti tradition, the devotional tradition. And the right-hand Tantra, called the White Tantra, is about working with prayers, meditation, mantras, yantras, just sacred geometry, going to places of pilgrimage, offering flowers, devotion to the Supreme in all its expressions of the gods. So this is one path and sect of Tantra, okay? And then we have another sect of Tantra, which is called the left-hand Tantra. And before I tell you a bit about that, what I want to share is that, in ancient yogic systems, it was the priests or the Brahmins that would have access to these rituals, and they were seen as the ones that were connected to God, and you had to go through them to get to the divine. But then there was an evolution in ancient Indian systems where the lay people were protesting, so to speak, and wanted to take power back. And so they started to adopt the traditions of yoga and Tantra in a way where they modified it to speak their language and meet their needs. So Tantra has had an evolution through so many centuries in India and in Buddhism, right? So now the left-hand Tantra is a path of Tantra where you reach a state of transcendence of this little self through very intense means that are meant to break the mind through sheer willpower. And it's quite intense. And this is a Tantra you might have heard of, where they use very intense sexual practices, graveyard practices, things that challenge the mind in its dualities, are good or bad. And so the tantric on the left-hand tantric path will go through intense measures to break the mind and then access the power of the chakras, or access the siddhis, or the powers. And the danger of the left-hand tantra is that many are on this path for power, to gain power over the dominion over the human realms, and to begin to use it for personal gains. And so there's a lot of, according to the scriptures, a lot of negative karma that comes with the left-hand tantra. So I just kind of want to tell you a bit about just, these two tantric paths. But the tantra that I want to talk to you about today, it goes beyond the left hand or the right hand. The topic that I want to speak to you about today is the essence and the heart of Tantra, which is, how do we understand our relationship and connection to the cosmos? What is the energetic internal workings that we can understand so that we're not binded or in a state of suffering, but we learn to work with ourselves to access a state of liberated love. The Tantra that I want to speak to you about goes to the heart of Tantra, because we look at what is our connection to the beloved, to the Creator, and how can we use the feminine yearnings, longings, and our own sexuality, sexual being, to work with her, because there's such power, there's such potency in that part of ourselves. How do we work with that to then gain connection to a state of love. So the teachings that I'm going to be offering in this course and in the ebook, where do they come from? First and foremost, the Tantra that I share with you today does not come from a particular book, although there's influences from different sects and different doctrines. The Tantra I talk about today comes from meditation. Meditation, where there's been a stillness of my mind that has allowed for the recognition of what is beyond thought and concepts. The Tantra that I share with you has come from the space of the heart. What heart? It is consciousness and awareness, observing a reality that is vast and interconnected with all things. And why the heart space? Why does the heart space reveal the truth of Tantra? The heart space is an energetic portal, you can say, the heart chakra. That is a window into love. And what is that love? That love is a glimpse into creation, into Creator. So the process of clearing the heart space, clearing the heart walls, healing the heart, allows for the heart to be open enough so that you can access into the space of the heart and feel and experience a reality that shows and reveals to us how everything is interconnected and related. So the Tantra that I share with you comes from the meditation on my heart, from my heart. The Tantra that I share with you, the teachings, also come from presence. And what is this presence? As I took the time for 15 years that I've been meditating to be still, what emerged were moments of recognition where there was presence, witnessing creation. I recognized there was this relationship between this presence that I am, that you are. And it was the aspect of the self that was witnessing and watching this material body and the movement of thoughts. And as I would spend time in that state of presence, a recognition emerged of this relationship that we had, that we all have, that all of creation has with presence. And in Tantra, they call this static principle Shiva. And they call the principle the energy, the force of manifestation, Shakti. And so what was revealed was that within everything was this principle of presence, the I am. It was one, and it was everywhere. And it was embracing and within all things. And all things were energy and emanating from Shiva. So from Shiva came Shakti. And this reference of Shiva and Shakti as the foundation of Tantra is discussed in ancient yogic literature. And Shakti is seen as the beloved of Shiva. She is in union with Shiva, and Shiva is always there. And this is the understanding we can take about ourselves as the lover and Creator as the beloved, so life as the beloved. So Tantra is a fundamental truth that belongs to all of us. It is our connection, relationship to the divine. And it is working with our humanness to reach the divine and to experience our union with love itself. Another thing I want to talk to you about Shiva and Shakti is that Shiva is referred to as the masculine, Shakti is referred to as the feminine, but in Tantra, they didn't talk about gender. They talked about the positive pole, prana, and negative pole, apana. So there were forces of polarities at play in the understanding of the masculine and the feminine, the yin and the yang. And so the teachings of eroticism and sexuality in Tantra, because there are teachings that describe how the microcosm, our human relationships, mirror the macrocosm, the relationship of creator with creation. So when we can start to work with the macrocosm, when we can start to work with the microcosm, when we can start to work with our human relationships and start to recognize how they are an expression of the macro, then we don't get stuck in the littleness of human relationships. We don't attach so tightly to them. We start to use them as a spiritual path for our own liberation. I've come to understand that when I started to bring into my spirituality my feminine, when I started to look at how to not dismiss, repress, or shun my feminine sexuality, my sexual being, my desires and my yearnings, how do I work with them in a way and integrate them into my spirituality? How is this part of my human self also part of my spiritual self? How can I understand my relationship to Creator and creation from this potent place of my heart, my desires, and my sexuality? How do both coexist? When I started to ask myself these questions, I started to go onto a journey of discovering my bond with the beloved. And I started to work with this part of my feminine. And the most powerful thing that happened was that I felt like I found the missing piece that left me feeling lonely, sad, unworthy, anxious, rejected and abandoned for so long. This was the missing piece that my feminine had been crying out for so many years. It was the part of me that I misunderstood. And as I started to work with Tantra within myself, not even with somebody else, we see images of Tantra with two people, but no, this was actually a path that was fully done within myself, within my psyche, within my heart, within my own energy. And as I started to move into this awareness of how to claim the state of liberated romance and how to embrace the parts of me, like my sexual life force energy, to recognize it as a part of Creator. And as I started to move into this, what came through was a sense of personal power in relationships and in life, to be honest. That was one of the big things for me. I was able to go into relationships and manifest really incredible experiences with the masculine. Whereas before, these experiences would leave me sad and rejected and in continuous cycles of pain and suffering. I all of a sudden was entering relationships where I was in love, but I wasn't attached to the place where there was codependency. I felt love from this person, but I didn't believe that they were the source of love. I was able to recognize that the love that was coming through them was a love that I was already married to and I was already connected with. As a result, I was able to give these people freedom and myself freedom in our relationships. And the most powerful thing was when the relationship was done, I knew it was done. We were complete. We had the connection that we were meant to have, and then that was it. So in embodying this path of Tantra, it gave me a certain personal power where I was able to finish a relationship or complete a connection without feeling like I was abandoned or in this deepest state of despair. And the power that I cultivated to know when something was done for me and to walk away, it freed up so much space in me. Like, I wasn't spending the last years anymore staying stuck in a relationship or in a state of constant sadness or rejection. Like, my energy was freed up enough to then start to contemplate on different things in my life, whether it's play or work or creativity or goals. And to get to this space, I had to discover the state of liberated romance and the understanding of Tantra within myself. So there was a lot of freedom and healing that came when I started to study and go into the inquiry of love and of working with my sexuality and my desires and my yearnings instead of working against them or shutting them or shaming them or being afraid of them. So this, I found, is something that was so important that I want to share with women. You know, being a therapist of over 10 years and a life coach, working with lots and lots of people, there were common themes that women would bring, that my friends would have, that my colleagues would have, that I would have. You know, the suffering, the yearning, the attachment, the codependency, the feeling like I want to be in love, where's love, looking for love, feeling like something is missing. All these things were coming up again and again and again. And so as I discovered processes to, release that belief system that love is not here. So I started to recognize that relationships can leave us, but love never leaves us. As I started to recognize these principles of Tantra, how do we access the relationship and partnership with the Creator? How do we tap into our own divine feminine sexuality, claim it as our own? These principles were starting to support the people that I was working with. These principles were what a lot of women were wanting to call into their own lives to work through and overcome their suffering, from codependency to pain in relationships. And it all came down to one thing, which was we're all just looking for love. Where is this love? So this is the reason why I shared and work with the principles of Tantra with all of you today. So why do I call this women's Tantra? Tantra is for everybody. Yes, a man can follow this Tantra as well, but why do I say the word women's Tantra is this? There is something unique about the feminine. Our whole body is sensational. The way that our energy flows to reach healing and spirituality is different than a masculine. The way our energy needs to flow as the feminine is different. The creativity that the feminine holds, like her womb space as a portal for creation. There are certain unique expressions of feminine energy. And I wanted to specifically address those energies, the way that the feminine works, and how we can work with the feminine in Tantra. So this is why I call it Women's Tantra. I also talk about the inclinations of the feminine that desires connection and intimacy so deeply and profoundly, and how we can work with that to reach our beloved. So this is the second reason why I work with the term feminine. Feminine is not a gender, it's a quality, it's a polarity.